Empathy is one of the 10 core competencies of the CASPer exam. Empathy is an attribute that ought to be shown throughout the CASPer exam, and that you should expect to find laced through many of the prompts. However, some will feature this attribute more explicitly than others. You should develop a general approach to scenarios that focus on empathy. This should be relatively fluid and adaptable, as this is a particularly broad domain, especially for someone looking to apply to medicine or a healthcare profession. Let's look at a typical empathy prompt. Your colleague at the shop where you are working recently lost their father. Since then, the quality of their work has gone downhill. If they do not improve their work, you fear that your manager will have to let them go. You know that the shop is struggling at the moment. Now, let's consider 3 questions that might follow such a prompt. Who do you need to consider in this situation? Would you see this as a normal response to bereavement? Can you provide an example of a time when you helped someone else through a particularly difficult time? The questions here can be broken down into an initial question that focuses directly on this scenario and on our ability to express empathy. Who do you need to consider? A second question that allows us to explore the fact of the prompt in some more detail, and a third question that allows us to describe a time when we showed empathy towards someone else. As with the other technique guides, this is written in such a way that your first and third questions are more reliant on the structure developed, and the second question is reliant on your ability to reflect. Remember that the CASPer you sit may pose a different structure. However, this is relatively typical. Let's look at the first question. Who do you need to consider in this situation? You should first use the general Blackstone tutors approach to determine the following. Relevant role. Here you might want to better understand your role in order to empathize with your colleague and communicate effectively. We only know that we are not the manager. Capture the core concern. The core concern here is your colleague's bereavement and subsequent problems. It is this that is leading to the difficulties with their performance. However, it appears that the store is struggling despite this from the way in which the question is phrased. Assumptions and additional information. What assumptions does the prompt make, and what additional information might you require to answer it? Here we should consider our own relationship with our colleague. How well do we know them, and how does this change our approach? You must then deploy a more specific approach. We should first establish our role in the store. We should begin by explaining that we must think about all other parties. This means empathizing with both our colleague and the store manager. We should explain how we should consider them. This might involve speaking to them in private and asking open-ended questions in order to understand their position, for example. We should make it clear that we are willing to work hard to think about how others might be feeling. We should make it equally apparent that we will then take their thoughts and feelings on board. Here, that means making a real effort to listen to what our colleague is saying. We should then provide a summary of who we are empathizing with or considering and why. We should expand on this as appropriate, e.g., we might say that we would consider the bereaved colleague first, and then reflect on what they have said and ensure that their feelings are considered when we think about the manager's position. Let's now look at the third question. Can you provide an example of a time when you helped someone else through a particularly difficult time? This question is an opportunity for you to describe a time when you showed empathy towards someone else. You should therefore have the following approach. Set the scene so that it is clear how the other party was struggling. Provide information on how you approached them and the effort you made to understand them and their position. Provide information on how you tried to help them. Ensure that you show an awareness of how difficult it is to truly understand someone else's thoughts and feelings. Show that you have reflected on the experience and that you are now able to empathize even more readily than you were before.